Welcome to American History Notes, where I discuss things that I've learned about American history. This very superficial surface survey. I hope that if you hear a name that interests you, or an event, or a topic, that you'll study on your own and you'll look into it. Um, and you don't have to agree with what I say or what my conclusions are. Um, that's fine as long as you're studying American history and you have your own conclusions formed from your own study. I hope this sparks you on to look this stuff up because it's fascinating. It's fascinating. So let's begin today. Willa Cather publishes O Pioneers in 1913. She will also write My Antonia and Death Comes for the Archbishop. Poet Joyce Kilmer writes Trees, and poet Vaco Lindsay establishes himself beginning in that year. In the next year, Robert Frost publishes his collection of poems entitled North of Boston, and poet Carl Sandburg publishes his famous Chicago Ode to the Hog Butcher for the World, and will publish many more famous poems until 1951, including Cornhuskers, Chicago Poems, Smoke and Steel, Slabs of Sunburnt West, and Good Morning America. In 1926, he will publish the first part of his landmark biographies of Abraham Lincoln, entitled Abraham Lincoln, The Prairie Years, which I grew up with reading in my grandfather's study, piano room, we called it. In 1915, Edgar Lee Masters publishes his Spoon River Anthology. Robert Frost publishes in that year or the next, The Road Not Taken. I think that's the one. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. One of my favorite poems. In 1923, he will publish Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, which that might be what I was quoting from. I just can't remember it exactly. Between 1915 and 1923, Wallace Stevens will write his famous poem, Sunday Morning, which, believe me, has nothing to do with going to church. He will publish a great many collections of poetry during his career while working for a Connecticut insurance company. In 1917, American-born British poet T.S. Eliot publishes the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, trumpeting the futility of existence. The unsaved, unregenerate writers from Mencken to Cather seem to be occupied with the frustration of a life of uncertainty and seeming pointlessness. In the same year, Edna St. Vincent Millay will publish Renaissance. Ezra Pound will begin a publishing career that lasts until the 1960s. He will become one of those celebrities who is more interesting than any of his works. In 1919, Sherwood Anderson, excuse me, will continue what has become a literary assault on small town and small town values by atheists and agnostics who want to create a dissatisfaction with that life in his Weinberg, Ohio. In the 1920s, a group of students from Vanderbilt University, John Crow Ransom, Alan Tate, Cleanth Brooks, and Robert Penn Warren, whose books I'm reading right now, among others, will form an influential literary circle called the Fugitives, Agrarians, or the Nashville Group. In 1920, Sinclair Lewis continues the assault on small town America called Main Street. He will write Babbitt in 1922, attacking capitalism vicariously through the American businessman. F. Scott Fitzgerald publishes This Side of Paradise in his collection of short stories, Flappers and Philosophers. Edith Wharton publishes The Age of Innocence, which is about anything but innocence. Willa Cather wins the new Pulitzer Prize in 1921 with One of Ours. Poet Edwin Arlington Robinson will win that prize 3 times in the 1920s. The Reader's Digest begins in 1922. Publisher Frank Gannett founds the Gannett Company in 1923, and it will one day own many news organs, including USA Today. Poet E. E. Cummings, that's the way he wrote his name with 2 small e's, began publishing in 1923. Next, of course, To God, America, I. Great poem about hypocrisy of politicians during wartime. Poet William Carlos Williams begins publishing in this year, the same year that Time magazine is founded by Henry Luce. Ernest Hemingway debuts in 1924 with his story collection, Our Time. He will go on to become one of the 20th century's most important writers of fiction. Excuse me. He writes like you're seeing it. It's like reality. It's amazing. I've made the comment. It's like he tears a hole in reality and walks through it. His work is fantastic. In 1926, he will publish The Sun Also Rises. Black poet Langston Hughes will publish his first collection of poems in 1926. In 1928, Stephen Vincent Benet will publish his epic Pulitzer Prize-winning Civil War poem, John Brown's Body. In the same year, poet Archibald MacLeish begins publishing about the woes of the modern world. In 1929, American novelist William Faulkner publishes The Sound and the Fury. Humorist James Thurber begins publishing in 1929. Pearl S. Buck, excuse me, writes The Good Earth in 1932. A lot of things about these people. Is there a lot of dissatisfaction with our form of government, with our form of economy, with life in general, with what they perceive because of their choices, pointlessness of existence. And I blame a lot of this on our wars, mass mobilization, mass participation in war. Always leads to social degeneration. So after a war, society degenerates, goes further and further down, and perversion and just a total decay is promoted and acknowledged and extolled as virtuous almost. And people are very unhappy as a result, but they don't know why. So they blame God or blame somebody else who's trying to make sense of it all. Anyway, next time we're going to talk about art and music and dance. So we have, a lot of interesting stuff that I learned that I just, just amazing. We'll go catch up to motion pictures again, and then when we get through with all that, we'll come back to literature. We have so much to cover before we get into special topics. I mean, we have things, not only music and dance and things like that, but we're going to be coming back, and then we have special topics on like civil rights movement, gay rights movement, abortion. Just it goes on and on. There's so much about American history that it's worth studying and exploring. So rather than just sitting and lamenting it, Cicero said, and I quoted this on Facebook. Cicero said, and I'm paraphrasing, if you don't know what went on before you, you always a child. So I hope you'll study American history and come to your own conclusions. It's okay if you disagree with me, if you just hate what I say, that's all right, as long as it spurs you on to do your own study and come to your own conclusions that you can tell somebody, I looked this up, I studied this. And that's what I want to see. Thank you very much.